The account of Lake SVARTSJÖ. A manuscript discovered in Cabin 7, SVARTSJÖ Rentals, April 2025. It is with a curious detachment that I set down these words, knowing well that they may constitute the final testament of my existence, yet feeling no particular alarm at this prospect. Indeed, as I write, my hand steady despite the late hour and the singular cold that has crept into my bones, I am conscious only of a profound sense of inevitability, as though I have been moving toward this moment through all the accumulated days of my life, and the path behind me has slowly, inexorably, been erased. My name is Signe Halvorsen. I am 31 years of age, formerly a journalist of some small capability in Minneapolis, latterly a freelance writer of declining prospects. These facts, which once seemed to constitute the sum of my identity, now strike me as curiously irrelevant, the biographical details of a person I scarcely recognize, viewed as through the wrong end of a telescope. I came to this remote corner of northern Minnesota some 3 weeks past, though time has acquired a fluid, uncertain quality that makes precision difficult, to investigate a series of drownings in Lake SVARTSJÖ. 3 deaths in 5 years, all ruled accidental, all occurring under circumstances that defied rational explanation. It was to be an article for City Pages, one of those true crime pieces that have become depressingly fashionable. I expected to find small-town tragedy, perhaps bureaucratic incompetence, possibly even something approaching a story. What I have found instead is something for which the language of journalism, indeed, the language of ordinary human discourse, is woefully, tragically inadequate. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me begin with the facts, insofar as facts retain any meaning in the shadow of what I have come to understand. 2. The town of Norby, population 847, though I suspect this figure includes a number of persons long deceased or departed, clings to existence on the strength of logging, fishing, and the modest tourism that the lake affords during summer months. It is one of those innumerable settlements scattered across the northern reaches of Minnesota, a cluster of weathered buildings along a brief stretch of highway, surrounded by vast forests of pine and birch that seem to press inward with a kind of patient hostility. The town possesses the usual appurtenances of rural American life: a Cenex station, a small grocery, a cafe serving the inevitable hot dish and lutefisk, 2 churches Lutheran and Catholic, and a bait shop of antique character operated by an aged Norwegian named Odin Lund. There is no cell service. The nearest hospital lies 40 miles distant in Bemidji. In winter, and the winter comes early here, with October bringing frost and November ice, the town achieves a profound isolation that must surely have driven more than one inhabitant to madness or drink or both. The lake itself lies perhaps half a mile from the town center, though its presence pervades everything. It is the reason for Norby's existence, the source of what meager prosperity the town knows, and, as I have discovered, something far more sinister. Lake SVARTSJÖ, the name is Swedish, meaning Black Lake, bestowed by Scandinavian settlers who recognized something in its character that prompted such nomenclature, covers perhaps 800 acres and achieves a depth that has never been satisfactorily measured. Official surveys list the depth at over 200 feet, but this figure, I have learned, represents merely the limit of the surveying equipment employed, not any true bottom. It is a glacial lake, formed in the unfathomable depths of geologic time by the slow violence of ice. The water is remarkably clear, one can see 20 feet down or more on a calm day, and bitterly cold even in summer. It is ringed by mixed forest, with a handful of seasonal cabins scattered along the shore and a small public beach near the town park. There is nothing about its appearance that would suggest anything untoward. Indeed, by daylight it possesses a stark beauty characteristic of the North Country. Yet there is something else, a quality I perceived from my first evening here, though I lacked then the vocabulary to name it. The silence around the lake is too complete. The stillness of its waters too profound. And beneath the appearance of natural tranquility lies something that even then, in my skeptical ignorance, produced a faint unease in my breast. I dismissed it, of course. I was here for a story, and journalists cannot afford the luxury of superstitious dread. How little I understood. 3. I have rented one of the small cabins operated by SVARTSJÖ Rentals, a single room of primitive character with a wood stove, a narrow bed, and windows that look through bare birch trees toward the lake. The rent is modest. The amenities are few. But it provides proximity to my subject, and that was all I required. Or so I believed. My investigation began, as such investigations must, with the official records of death. 3 drownings in 5 years, not an unusual number for a popular recreational lake, perhaps, but possessing certain common features that had attracted my attention when I first read of them in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The first victim was Linnea Saarinen, aged 17, who drowned in July of 2019 during a bonfire gathering with her classmates. She had been a strong swimmer, captain of the Norby High School swim team, and by all accounts in good spirits that evening. Yet at approximately 10 p.m., she had risen from her place by the fire and walked directly into the lake without a word to her companions. They called after her. She did not turn. She did not respond. She simply continued walking until the water closed over her head, and she vanished into the darkness. Her body was recovered the following morning. The medical examiner found no water in her lungs, a puzzling detail that suggested she had been dead before drowning, though from what cause could not be determined. There were no signs of violence, no evidence of intoxication or drug use. The death was ruled accidental, though the examiner's report contained a note of obvious perplexity. The second victim was Mikkel Borgström, aged 34, a local contractor who drowned in March of 2023. His truck was found at the boat launch on a frigid morning, keys in the ignition, wallet and cellular telephone on the seat, jacket folded neatly on the hood. He had walked into water scarcely above freezing, wearing only jeans and a flannel shirt, and had drowned in 15 feet of water. His body was recovered 3 days later, bloated and gray, his eyes open. Those who knew him reported that he had seemed distracted in the days before his death, forgetful, distant, spending long periods alone at the lake. He had recently divorced. He had spoken of feeling peaceful near the water, of finding solace in its depths. The death was ruled suicide, though his family vigorously disputed this conclusion. The third and most recent victim was Astrid Nygaard, aged 29, who had come from Minneapolis in August of 2024 to escape, as I gathered from the landlady, some personal crisis, a divorce or romantic disappointment. She had rented a cabin for 2 weeks and had spent her days in solitary contemplation by the water. On her 9th night at the lake, she had left her cabin at approximately 2 a.m. and drowned in 2 feet of water at the shoreline, shallow enough that she might have stood upright with her head clear of the surface, yet she had lain face down and breathed water until her lungs filled and her heart stopped. The landlady, Mrs. Dagny Thorson, had seen her walking toward the lake that night. She had thought nothing of it. People often walked at night. It was peaceful. It was normal. But when I pressed her, when I asked about Astrid's state of mind, about her behavior in the days before her death, Mrs. Thorson's face had gone peculiarly stiff, and she had said only, she spent a great deal of time looking at the water. As if it were speaking to her. I conducted interviews. I reviewed police reports and medical examiner findings. I photographed the lake from various angles and at various times of day. I spoke with family members, friends, and witnesses. I compiled notes and began to construct a narrative. Yet even as I pursued these conventional journalistic activities, I became aware of a curious reluctance among the townspeople to discuss the lake itself. They would speak of the victims, with pity, with sorrow, with the resigned fatalism of those accustomed to loss, but when I attempted to probe deeper, to ask whether there might be some common factor, some pattern to these deaths, they became evasive. The subject was changed. The conversation was concluded. I was left with the distinct impression that they knew something they would not say. Only Odin Lund, the proprietor of the bait shop, seemed willing to acknowledge what others would not. He is a man of great age. I would estimate him to be past 80, with the weathered face and gnarled hands of one who has spent his life in physical labor. Yet his eyes retain a peculiar sharpness, and when he looked at me across the counter of his shop, I had the uncomfortable sensation of being assessed and found wanting. "You're asking questions about the drownings," he said. It was not a question. "Yes. For an article." He nodded slowly. "And you're staying at the lake?" "At SVARTSJÖ Rentals." "Yes. How long?" "I've taken a monthly rental. Through the end of November." Something changed in his expression, a tightening around the eyes, a compression of the lips. You should leave sooner than that. Why? But he would not say more that day. He merely shook his head and turned to organizing his tackle, and I understood myself to be dismissed. It was only later, after I had begun to feel the first subtle alterations in my own consciousness, the first faint awareness of something amiss, that he consented to speak with me in earnest. I must attempt now to describe something that defies description, to put into inadequate words an experience that exists beyond the ordinary boundaries of human perception. It began subtly, as such things must. For the first week of my residence at the lake, I was aware only of a vague unease, the sensation one has of being watched, though no watcher is visible. The silence seemed too complete. The stillness of the water too profound. When I stood at the shore taking photographs or making notes, I would find my attention drifting, my thoughts becoming unfocused, as though some portion of my mind had been quietly claimed by something external to myself. I attributed this to fatigue, to the stress of the project, to the isolation of the place. I am, or was, a rational woman, trained in the skeptical methods of journalism, disinclined to superstition or fancy. But the sensation grew stronger. By the second week, I found myself drawn to the lake at odd hours, early morning before dawn, late evening after sunset. I would walk down through the birch trees and stand at the shore, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for an hour or more, simply staring at the water. When I returned to the cabin, I could not recall precisely what I had been thinking about during these intervals. My mind felt curiously blank, as though something had been carefully erased. I began to dream. Always the same dream. I am swimming in dark water, descending through layers of increasing cold and pressure, and there is no fear, only a profound sense of rightness, of homecoming. I wake from these dreams with a curious disappointment, as though I have been interrupted in the midst of something essential. And I began to hear, though, hear, is not the correct word, for it was nothing so crude as sound, a call. A summons. An invitation that bypassed my ears entirely and spoke directly to some deep, primitive portion of my consciousness. It had no words. It had no voice. Yet I understood its meaning with perfect clarity. Come. Come to the water. Come home. It was at this juncture that Odin Lund asked me to return to his shop after closing hours. When I arrived, he locked the door behind me and led me to a small back room where we might speak in privacy. My grandmother was Ojibwe, he began without preamble. Leech Lake Band. She married my grandfather in 1923, when such marriages were not looked upon favorably by either whites or Indians. They built this shop and made a life here, and she told me stories that her people had told for generations. He paused, his ancient hands folded on the desk between us. The lake has another name, he continued. The Ojibwe called it Manaduzagaigan. Spirit Lake. Not because spirits dwell there, that's a misunderstanding of white people, who think spirits are like ghosts, like the dead. The Ojibwe word, Manadu, means something deeper. It means a place where the world is thin. Where something vast and incomprehensible touches through into our reality. I listened in silence, feeling the small hairs rise on the back of my neck. There are such places scattered across the earth, Odin said. Most have been built over, forgotten, lost. But some remain. The lake is one of them. It goes deeper than any glacier could have carved, the soundings in the 1970s couldn't find a bottom. It goes down, and at the bottom. He shook his head. My grandmother said there is no bottom. She said it opens into something else. Something that exists outside of what we call reality. And this thing, I said, my voice not quite steady. It calls to people. It doesn't call. It doesn't want. Those are human concepts. It simply is, and we are the ones who perceive it, who interpret its existence as a call. Certain people are more sensitive to it, people who have suffered loss, who have become unmoored from life, who no longer feel firmly attached to the world. To such people, the lake offers. He struggled for words. Dissolution. An end to the burden of individual consciousness. A return to the vast, undifferentiated whole from which we all emerged. You're describing death, I said. No, not death. Something older than death. Something that makes death seem almost gentle by comparison. He looked at me with terrible intensity. You must leave, he said. Soon. You came here carrying grief, I can see it in you. You're vulnerable to the lake's influence. The longer you stay, the stronger its hold becomes. And once you're too far gone, once you've begun to want what it offers, there is no return. I should have been frightened. Any rational person would have been frightened. But all I felt was a strange, dull resistance, the reluctance of one who has been offered a comfortable bed and does not wish to be roused. How do you know all this? I asked. His face grew grave. Because it called to me once. In 1987, after my wife died. For months I stood at the shore, feeling it pull at me, feeling the terrible relief of what it promised. My grandmother came up from the reservation. She stayed with me, wouldn't let me near the water. Alone. Made offerings, burned medicines, talked to me hour after hour about everything I still had to live for. Eventually the worst of it passed. But it never entirely goes away. On bad days, I can still feel it, like a voice behind a closed door, calling my name. He leaned forward. Listen to me. Pack your things tonight. Drive to Bemidji, or back to Minneapolis. Write your article from there if you must. But do not stay by this lake. The 3 people who drowned, they all exhibited the same pattern you're showing. Distraction. Compulsion. Spending hours by the water. And then, one day, they simply walked in and didn't come back. I nodded. I said I understood. I said I would leave. But even as I spoke these words, I knew I was lying. 7. I did not leave. I told myself I would, tomorrow, or the next day, after I had finished one more interview, taken one more photograph, written one more section of notes. But the tomorrows accumulated, and I remained. The pull of the lake grew stronger. I stopped sleeping properly. The dreams came nightly now, and in them I descended through black water toward something vast and patient that waited in the depths. I would wake gasping, my heart racing, yet what I felt was not fear but frustrated longing, the ache of one who has been torn away from a beloved presence. During the day, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on anything but the lake. I would sit at my laptop, hands poised over the keyboard, and realize an hour had passed while I stared through the window at the water visible between the birch trees. I would walk to the shore, just for a moment, and find myself standing ankle-deep in the icy water, with no memory of having waded in. The cold no longer troubled me. This should have alarmed me. It was late October, then early November, and the water was approaching freezing, but the cold had ceased to feel like cold. It felt like relief, like absolution, like the embrace of something that had been waiting for me all my life. I understood, now, what had happened to Linnea and Mikkel and Astrid. I understood why they had walked into the water without fear, without hesitation. They had not been driven mad. They had not succumbed to suicidal despair. They had simply answered a call that offered what all their human relationships, their human purposes, their human struggles could not provide: an end to separation. An end to the exhausting, painful work of being an individual consciousness, isolated and alone. The lake promised unity, dissolution, a return to the vast, cold, eternal whole. And I wanted it. God help me, I wanted it with an intensity that eclipsed every other desire I had ever known. 8. I have lost track of time. The days blur into one another, gray skies, bare trees, the lake freezing at its margins. I no longer eat regularly. Food tastes like ashes. I drink water from the tap and find it insufficient. Only the water of the lake truly slakes my thirst. I have stopped working on the article. The laptop sits closed on the cabin's single table, a relic of a life that no longer seems real or relevant. What does journalism matter? What does any human endeavor matter in the face of what I have glimpsed? For I have glimpsed it now, the thing that waits beneath the lake. Not in any visual sense, for it has no form that human eyes could parse. But I have felt its presence, vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to human concerns. It is not evil. It is not malevolent. It simply exists on a scale so immense that our categories of good and evil, life and death, become meaningless. It is the deep. It is the cold. It is the dark from which all things emerge and to which all things must eventually return. And it is calling me home. Odin came to the cabin yesterday, or perhaps it was several days ago. Time has lost its linearity. He knocked. He called my name. I was inside, I think, though I might have been at the shore. I did not answer. After a time, he pushed a note beneath the door. I found it later, his handwriting, shaky with age. Signy, it is not too late. You still have a choice. Please leave. Please call someone. You are not alone. OL. But he is wrong. I have always been alone. We are all alone, trapped within the prison of individual consciousness, separated from one another by the unbridgeable gulf of subjective experience. Every human connection is an illusion, a temporary fiction we maintain against the crushing reality of our isolation. The lake offers truth. The lake offers an end to the lie of separateness. I will not call anyone. There is no one to call. My sister Carrie is in St. Paul, consumed by her pregnancy and her husband and the small concerns of her small life. My former fiancé Torben has moved on, his social media filled with photographs of his new lover. My editor at City Pages has other writers, other stories. I am unnecessary. I am superfluous. I am already half ghost, and the lake is simply offering to complete the transformation. Ix. It is dawn. I know this because the sky beyond the cabin window has lightened from black to gray, though I cannot recall whether I slept or merely waited through the night. I am dressed, or perhaps I have been dressed all along. I no longer undress for bed. There seems little point. The call is unbearable now. Not painful, but overwhelming in its intensity, a summons that resonates in my bones, in my blood, in the deep structures of my brain. It is no longer possible to ignore it. It is no longer possible to resist. I am going to the lake now. I can feel my body rising, my feet carrying me toward the door, though I am not consciously directing these movements. It is as though I have become a passenger in my own flesh, watching from a great distance as this body that was once mine moves toward its destined end. The air outside is bitter cold. Snow fell during the night, an inch or two, transforming the landscape into a study in black and white. The birch trees stand skeletal against the colorless sky. The lake lies before me, its surface filmed with new ice at the margins, but still open at the center, a black wound in the white world. I am walking. The snow crunches beneath my feet. I am wearing only pajamas and slippers, but the cold does not touch me. I am beyond cold now. Beyond heat. Beyond all the small physical sensations that bind consciousness to body. I have reached the shore. The ice fractures beneath my weight, thin plates spinning away across the dark water. I wade in. The water rises past my ankles, my calves, my knees. It should be agonizing. The temperature cannot be more than a few degrees above freezing, but it feels like homecoming. Like absolution. Like love. The bottom is dropping away. Another step and I will be swimming. Another step and the water will close over my head. And I understand, now, what Linnea understood, what Mikkel understood, what Astrid understood. This is not death. This is return. This is the answer to every question I have ever asked, the solution to every problem I have ever faced. This is the end of loneliness, of grief, of the terrible burden of selfhood. The lake is singing, or I am singing, or we are the same song, and there has never been any difference. I am going down now. The water is over my head. I am not drowning. I am dissolving. I am becoming part of something vast and cold and eternal, something that has waited in the depths since before the first humans walked the earth, something that will wait long after the last human has perished. I am going home. I am going. Here the manuscript ends. The handwriting of the final pages shows evidence of significant deterioration, letters poorly formed, lines uneven, whole words crossed out and rewritten. The cabin was not opened again until April 15, 2025, when the cleaning service arrived for the spring season. Signy Halvorsen's automobile remained in the parking area, her possessions undisturbed within the cabin. Her body was recovered from Lake SVARTSJÖ on April 23, after the ice had fully melted. The medical examiner determined the cause of death as drowning, but noted the unusual absence of struggle or defensive wounds. This manuscript was found on her laptop computer and was initially withheld from public release. It is being shared now with the permission of Ms. Halvorsen's surviving family, who hope that it may serve as a warning to others who might be drawn to Lake SVARTSJÖ during periods of emotional vulnerability. The lake remains. The call remains. And each year, with terrible regularity, someone answers.